the home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views,
there's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of The Cycle right here on Vuka Online Radio with me, your host Mogale Mothale. Thank you so much for streaming tonight, and thanks to my colleague Mogale Mothale for the news bulletin. He will be coming back at 7 to bring you the latest in the news. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And tonight on the show, we will be looking at some of the African leaders running for office at an advanced age. I mean, you can think of Paul Biya of Cameroon, who is 91. He has been in power since 1982. Alassane Ouattara of Ivory Coast, who is 83 years old. He has been in power since 2010. You can think that maybe it's not that bad. Emerson Mnangagwa has been in power not long ago. He's 82. He wants to amend the constitution to allow him to be in office until 2029. Why? Because he feels that some of the projects that he has started, he wants to continue and see those projects and programs to the completion. So that's the reason why he wants to stay on power for such a long time. And who knows, maybe in 2029, he will say, I want to stay 2 more years. Yoweri Museveni, the president of Uganda, who is 80, has been there in that office since 1986. And many others. Few weeks ago, I've seen a video of one of the Ugandan politicians by the name of Moses Ali, who is 92. The old man can't even speak properly. He is not well, and he still wants to run for re-election in his constituency. And you ask yourself, why these older leaders wants to hold on to power? And one can actually think of it this way. Democracy has become, unfortunately, a buzzword frequently invoked to describe a prolonged and multifaceted socio-political process involving dialogue, contestation, protest, and paradoxically even military coups, as we have seen in some parts of the continent, or what is often termed in academic discourse as unconstitutional changes of government. And nowhere in this complexity this is more evident than on the African continent. I mean, you ask yourself, is it because we have weak institutions? Is it because we are not standing up for ourselves enough? Or is it because we are actually not represented in the legislature or well represented in parliament, so that we are able to stand against these leaders who have been in power for a very long time and they don't want to relinquish power? So that's the conversation that we'll be having tonight. And Tendai Mbanje, a good friend of the show, will be joining us later on the show to talk to us about this. He has done some wonderful work, some research in this field. He has been to many countries observing elections and has a very great insights when it comes to the future of democracy on the African continent. So that's the conversation that we'll be having this evening with Tendai Mbanje. And of course, you can be part of this conversation by following us on all our social media platforms. We are at Vuka Online Radio on X, on Facebook, as well as on Instagram. So that's the conversation. And of course, right after the break, we will be going through into some of the headlines or some of the highlights of the week. A lot happened last week. The US tariffs has kicked in on the 7th, last week on Thursday at midnight. We just wait and see if the South African team will be able to come up with a deal. Something that I personally don't think will be able to come up with a deal, because it doesn't look like the US has an appetite listening to us. It doesn't look like they're interested in any shape or form. So it doesn't look like we will come out with anything from the US. Maybe we just have to, accept that this is the situation and wait until maybe Donald Trump is out of office, and maybe we can renegotiate our way back into the US. So that's the conversation. I mean, that's part of some of the highlights that we'll be looking into right after the break. For now, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we go straight into the highlights of the week. Don't forget that later, Tendai Mbanje will be joining us as we'll be looking into some of the African leaders who are running for office at an advanced age. I mean, you can think about all of these leaders that sometimes we look at them on social media. Some, they can't even walk properly. They can't articulate themselves properly, but they still want to be in power. So we are going to be having that conversation with Tendai Mbanje later on the show. Don't forget again that we are together until 7 p.m. this evening. Take a listen to our very good sounds. When we come back from the break, will be straight into the highlights of the.
How do you know the life or personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Welcome back to the show right here on Vuka Online Radio. This is The Cycle, the show that comes to you every Monday from 6 until 7 p.m. For those who have just joined us tonight, we will be joined by Tendai Mbanje later on the show to talk to us about African leaders who are not willing to leave office. We spoke about Paul Biya. We spoke about Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, who has been there since 1986. Paul Biya has been in office since 1982. Some of us were not even born yet. And today we are even able to vote. And these people have been in power. So Tendai Mbanje will be helping us to understand why is this the case. Some, they've actually made the point that it is because they want to maintain legacy and stability, where supporters or their supporters feel that these are people with experience and they have got the ability to maintain peace in their countries. Sometimes it is because of the weak term limits, where some constitutions allow indefinite re-election, or they just amend the constitution if they want to stay on in power. One of the reasons why I think they stay in power for such a long time, but Tendai Mbanje will be helping us later when he joins us, is the issue around political entrenchment, where there's a long-standing one-party dominance, and to some extent, there is a patronage systems that discourages change. So these are some of the issues that one can think of when you think about some of these leaders who have been in office for a very long time and they don't want to leave office. So Tendai, as I've said, he will be joining us later to look into some of these issues. At this point, let's go to some of the highlights of the week. A lot happened last week. We are still talking about that video that have been making some rounds on social media of Deborah Malaga, the CEO of Independent Development Trust, where in this video he is attempting to bribe, offering a bribe to a Daily Maverick journalist Peter Mbanje, to stop covering stories around her involvement in tender that is concerning a multi-million rand project to install oxygen plants and some of the investments in property investments that she has made. And subsequent to that, the Minister of Public Works, Dean McPherson, opened a criminal case against her in Cape Town. Let's take a listen to Dan McPherson outside Cape Town Police Station.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and thank you for joining me here this afternoon. Last week, when I updated the public in relation to the outcome of the PwC oxygen plant tender, I began my address by acknowledging the crucial work of investigative journalism in South Africa. I specifically said that it keeps public officials and politicians accountable outside of the normal democratic checks and balances. Since I assumed office as the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, I have been very clear with our staff and our entities that I cannot and will not accept wrongdoing in the department. And where required, I would personally open cases against those accused of criminality because I must lead from the front when it comes to ensuring we are a capable and ethical-based economic delivery unit in South Africa. At 8 p.m. last night, I met with the board to discuss the events that unfolded in the media that morning. As I said on social media and to the board, watching the video of Ms. Malaka allegedly offering Mr. Myburg a bribe of 60,000 rand made me sick to my stomach and left me in disbelief. It's one thing to hear about corruption. It's another thing to see it take place so blatantly and with a feeling of impunity. This stands in complete opposition to everything that I believe in and stand for as a minister. I briefed the board on my intended actions today and to understand what processes will unfold with regards to the disciplinary case against the suspended CEO. I can therefore confirm that earlier, short while ago, I formally opened a criminal case against the suspended Chief Executive Officer of the Independent Development Trust, Mr. Borgo Malaka, and the IDT spokesperson, Mr. Pasha Mogale Mothale, at the Cape Town Central Police Station. These allegations remain deeply disturbing. They, in my view, are not just a criminal act, but an assault on the institutional framework of government to provide services to the people of South Africa, especially in the social infrastructure space that the IDT is responsible for. Attempting to bribe a journalist to bury the truth is an attack not only on the free press, but on our democracy. It is an attempt to silence accountability, to undermine public confidence, and to shield corruption from exposure. Ladies and gentlemen, as I have said earlier, I've made it clear and will continue to do so in word and in action that the department and its entities are no longer a playground and safe haven for maladministration and corruption.
Well, that was the Minister of Public Works, Mr. Dan McPherson, after opening that criminal case against the CEO of Independent Development Trust, Vuka, and also the spokesperson. So this is one story that has kept many of us talking last week in shock, because this is something that we have never seen before. We have heard of stories of bribery, but we have never seen something like this, something that was caught on camera. Let's move to another story that came out last week, the ANC-NEC meeting that concluded last week, Monday. And of course, there's been a lot of issues that were discussed at that meeting. And of course, one of those obviously is the US-South Africa relations that have been really, not going so well, even after the president went to the White House and meeting with Donald Trump. And I must say that I thought that things were beginning to take shape, but it looks like we are back to square one. And it made me to just remember or think about the 49 refugees that were taken to the United States. We haven't heard of what is happening with them. What is the process of those who are still looking forward to be relocated or moved to the United States and be given a special status in the United States. I don't know how far are we with that. There hasn't been any report. There hasn't been any updates on that. It looks like it's just a dead story. Even our journalists in the mainstream media are not actually following on that story. And of course, among other things that the NEC, ANC meeting discussed is also the issue around tariffs. No, we are praising ourselves for this because it has kicked off, and I don't know if we are ready, particularly the citrus market, particularly the wine market, and the automotive industry. I don't know how they're going to cope with this as we await if the US and the South African government will be able to find some common ground. Let's listen to Fikile Mpadula talking about the sanctions. Remember, there are sanctions that they are likely to come on the ANC leaders because of the racist laws, apparently, because of the killing of white people that is happening in South Africa under the leadership of the ANC, according to the United States. Let's listen to what Fikile Mpadula had to say as he was briefing the media last week.
If it means going to suffer through sanctions as leaders of the ANC, let it be. We'll never back imperialists. To subvert our democracy, to subvert our sovereignty. It happened during the period of struggle. It will happen even now. We will never forsake our country, which we fought for its liberation. And we're still marching on even now. Not this ANC, not this leadership. If they want to bring sanctions on us, let them bring them. But this country, South Africa, all its citizens know that it is a democratic country, it's a liberated country, and we are still transforming this country in order to achieve equity. And we will still pursue redress because we are not equal in this economy. This economy is still male white dominated, and you want to tell us to abandon policies that seek to advance transformation. We're told by somebody who's more wealthy than all of countries combined in the world that I'll give you Starlink, but you must not do black economic empowerment. In our country, we must agree to that. It's not possible to agree to that. You are asking us to abandon what we stand for. You are asking the ANC, this African National Congress, to stop struggling and then close shop and become something. We are not DA. DA has to agree with that because they don't want affirmative action. Leave black economic empowerment. They don't want affirmative action. They don't want redress. They don't believe in transformation. Now they are talking about black economic empowerment, which we reviewed and said that is triple BEE. And then we broadened it to be broad-based. And all of that.
Well, that was Fikile Mpadula speaking about some of the sanctions that will be imposed by the American government on some of the ANC leaders. Last week, again, we had the post-cabinet Lekgotla briefing, which was addressed by the minister in the presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, and she spoke about the tariffs because this was a big story last week as the tariffs were, beginning to take effect. So this was a very big story. Remember, there was also that telephonic meeting or telephonic call meeting that took place last week. I think it was on Wednesday last week, when the president was actually speaking with Donald Trump. And according to the statement coming from the presidency, is that both the presidents have agreed to continue talks, to continue to engage. But like I said in the opening, that I'm not sure if these engagements will yield any results. Remember, Donald Trump actually about a week and a half ago did say that he's not even sure if he'll actually be attending the G20 meeting in November, because terrible things are happening here. So it doesn't look like he actually have changed his mind with regards to South Africa, and I'm not sure if this bilateral talks will still yield any results after all of these things that have been happening in the last few months. Let's take a listen to what Kumbuzo Nchabeni had to say with regard to issues around tariffs.
But the principle is that the room for engagement is there, and the president continues to engage. And you recall that in May he led May or April? May he led the delegation to Washington to open that room for negotiation. And it's from that meeting, the working visit, that there was an assurance that as soon as we reach a deal, then there will be a review of the tariffs. And then, there's nothing new in that. That's why, otherwise, if there was no prospect for a review, there would not be need for a continuous engagement. So we continue to engagement because there's always prospect for review. And we're not the only country that is in that position. We are part of the others.
So like I said, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if these discussions will yield any results, but this is something that will be keeping a close eye on, because it's very important for our ailing economy, our economy that is not doing so well. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. This is where we are going to leave it. There's a lot that we did not cover. The Women's Day celebrations over the weekend, in Limpopo. So we are going to leave it here. After this short break, we are coming back with our conversation with Tendai Mbanje, who will be helping us to understand why our African leaders so obsessed with being in office. They don't want to leave office. I just don't know why. Why is it that they don't want to leave the office? And Tendai Mbanje will be helping us. What is the future of democracy in Africa with all these leaders that don't want to leave the office, even when they are at an advanced age? We are going to have that conversation right after this short break. Stay tuned.
The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is a professional development center for professionals who aim to improve their professional standing. This means that the learning programs we run are more than just academic programs. They are work-based programs that focus on leveraging your current experience as a professional to build your overall profile. A year down the line, the Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is developing into a preferred center for professional development in Pretoria, with 8 professional development faculties including accounting, teaching, entrepreneurship, as well as IT and many more. For more information, go to acwbl.org or dial +27 12 751 7608. The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning, where work is learning.
Welcome back to the show this evening with me, your host, Mogale Mothale. On the line, I am joined by our good friend right here on the cycle, Tendai Mbanje, who comes to the show to help us with complex issues that some of us, we actually don't understand. And tonight, we are looking at democracy in Africa, African leaders who are running for office at an advanced age. And some of these leaders, you can really see that they are worn out, but they still want to run for office. And this evening, Tendai is going to help us unpack this, get to understand why are these leaders clinging on to power. What is it that we are not doing right as the citizens, and what does our constitution say about term limits and some of the amendments that these leaders are making to the constitution so that it allows them to stay on power. Good evening, Tendai, and welcome to Vuka.
Thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure to be here and to interact with this insightful show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tendai. Maybe let's just start here. Why are these leaders continue to want to really remain in office, even when they are in their late 80s, some approaching their 90s? What are the circumstances under which these leaders really want to cling on to power?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think there are a number of issues involved. But also I wouldn't want to speak in a vacuum. I'll give an example of Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. Yoweri is of advanced stage. I will give example of Pobia of Cameroon. Pobia is in his 92. I will give an example of Ouattara of Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire. He is in his I think he's 84 if I'm not mistaken. So we see that Paul Biya, for example, is 92, is running for another term that will perhaps lead into 99. And because it's a 7-year term, Yoweri Museveni will be in his 90s. Ouattara would also close to 90. So these are few examples of the many examples that we have on the continent of leaders who are clinging to power. One thing that these leaders have done is that they've changed their constitutional provisions. They've removed term limits and also they've removed age limits. So they don't, in terms of their domestic laws, they're eligible to run for office. And the other thing is that some of these leaders, they come from liberation movements, parties that took the country to independence, and then you see that they've maintained a grip of power through force, and they have been in power for decades, and they have worked over and over again to be able to retain power. They've been focusing on power retention instead of actual economic development, or at least improving the livelihoods of their people. Another point is that they've been managed to fragment and suppress opposition parties, and also sometimes, or apart from just fragmenting and suppressing opposition, you have also seen that ideological manipulation and manipulating their own people to think in a certain way, which has managed them to have that authoritarian grip. And we see a trend of them. A trend of lies that it's the people that want them. It's the same rhetoric. They don't want, but they are forced by the people. So I think that those are kind of the issues that we have seen arising, and securitization and military being at the center for power retention, among other things. So those are kind of things that are enabling these guys to come back to power. But it's not them. It's the group, is the institution.
Yes.
Their political parties have transformed to become cults.
Yes.
And it's not only them that want them back, but it's the people, the cult around them that want them to come back to power.
Yes. You spoke about enablers, people who are, or institutions that are enabling these leaders to want to hold on to power. And we can give an example of one Moses Ali in Uganda, who is not even well in terms of his health, and he declared his availability from his constituency, saying that if my people want me to remain as their leader, I will continue doing that. So we are seeing the people who are enabling these leaders to to continue to cling on to power, we also see the institutions that I will say that they are weak, which are actually enabling these leaders to want to remain in power. So are you saying then that there's a need for us to restructure our political approach when it comes to elections?
So in terms of the institutions that enable them, I would say, of course, there are two things. One, you have touched that there are weak institutions in terms so far as the one that prevents them from doing that. The one that allows this to perpetuate. So in terms of addressing this, stopping it to recur, it's something that cannot be easily done in terms of in the context of elections. Why I'm saying so? Because if you see that enablers are institutions, for example, military is one key component that whenever the military take a certain position, they will undermine judiciary, they will undermine police, they will undermine electoral commissions, they will undermine. So most of these are enabled by the military. And most of these guys also come from military background. For example, Yoweri Museveni comes from military background. The most Ali that you have said comes as a military background. And if you want to look at Phobia, it's got the backing of the military. So in terms of the solution from the question you're asking, it becomes very difficult. It becomes very complex because these are backed by military, these are backed by guns. Whereas elections are exercises that are outside, they are civilian exercises. So you see that there is a gap in terms of when it comes to solutions. Civilians cannot, or the civilian activities cannot address military problems. The core of the problem is generally military, and then we have this civilian activity that brings about an election, brings about political participation and so forth. So we see these contradictions. So the solutions cannot work. Military solutions cannot be applied, cannot, or states that are governed by military cannot find themselves having a solution through elections.
And would you say that, therefore, that there's a role that needs to be played by people who are organized in a form of civil society to resolve all of these inefficiencies?
So, civil society cannot. Why civil society cannot? It can amplify the voices. But insofar as the solutions are concerned, I think systems of such nature where we see that, for example, we see Ouattara is coming back for the fourth term, if I'm not mistaken. Paul Biya is coming for the eighth term. And at the core of it is that it's enabled by the military. So military tends to suppress civil society. If they want to go back to streets, they are killed, they are shot. If they want to, we see a death of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, surveillance. If they want to talk much, we have forced disappearances, we have abductions. If they want to protest, they are met with live ammunition, which is a disproportionate violence. So you see that the weak civil society, when it comes to its interaction with the military, it becomes very challenging. It's become very weak because the response they get from military regimes of organized groups that have guns trying to protect the home of power is that it almost paralyzes civil society. And in most cases, we see what other scholars have termed democratic fatigue or electoral fatigue. Even when it comes to elections, people would want to meaningfully exercise elections, but at the end of the day, if systems are captured by military personnel or military structures or government or military group, you realize that these democratic practices become some form of ceremonial. It becomes just a ritual without any meaning. So civil society, actually the issues, the voices we see already in Tanzania, for example. The civil society is talking about the issues, the problems here and there, but it's paralyzed. The paralyzed civil society because Chama Cha Mapinduzi is using force through police. You see that there are a lot of abductions, the reports of abductions, the reports of there are reports of declining freedoms of expression and free speech. I see that the African Union has issued a resolution and so forth regarding the Tanzanian matter. I have not read the resolution, but these are the issues that we have also been outlining through Human Rights Watch and other think tanks. So that's the challenge with civil society. So it's try to work in an environment that is conducive for them to do their work.
Yes, and in your work, I'm sorry just to come in there. In your work that you do, being an election observer, interacting with regional bodies, interacting with politicians themselves, with governments, do you think that regional bodies, at some point, they are complicit in this?
Yes, I do think so. I've written an opinion on Tanzania where I was calling them, when I was calling the African Union, that they're like bystanders sleeping, whereas the Tanzanian opposition leader has been arrested, there's chaos and so forth. So you see that our regional bodies, the African Union, SADC, their composition is generally based on similar principles that we see in the UN Charter: respect for sovereignty of states, non-interference, cooperation, all those principles that are the core international law principles. That's one that defines the formation of these regional bodies. Then, in terms of our regional body, their identities, that they are more, although they masquerade as Pan-African, but they have this tendency of emphasis on diplomacy in situations even that require the union to take a firm position. Of course, it has been proved time and again that sanctions don't work. So the African Union has said that they shy away from sanctions. So they tend to prefer diplomacy, but at the same time, if diplomacy becomes too much of a tool, and states are aware of that, it's a diplomatic mission, it's a diplomatic process to problem. It's up to, there's so much discretion to the state. For example, if you read the African Charter on democracy, elections, democracy and governance, if you read from Article 17 to Article 21, it tells you the involvement of the regional body, for example, the African Union, so far as elections are concerned. The member states that invite the regional body to come and, it's at its discretion to come and observe and provide this oversight role on elections. So the state can choose not to invite. So that's where they become complicit, because they have given so much discretion to states, such that at the end of the day, states become stronger than the union itself. States can choose to take a certain position, and yet the union will not do much. Also, the union is not, in terms of, it's different from the European Union, where it's much more stronger. It's what it passes is binding with. So our union, the African Union, is still evolving. So far, and also our democracies are very uneven on the continent, even in the region. So you see that there's so many variations that makes the function of the African Union very challenging. Insofar as it can enforce rights, it can enforce democratic norms in its member states.
And as we conclude, because we have ran out of time tonight, clearly from what you are saying is that there are no frameworks. There is nothing that really guides and also gives these regional bodies teeth to bite, even a continental body like the African Union. What do you think we should do moving forward from here in order to make sure that we create space for change, we create space for democracy, we create space for young people who are full of energy and expertise to also take up the reins as leaders of these countries that we have spoken about tonight?
Maybe I did not come out clear. We do have the guidelines, we do have the framework is there, so that the framework is not utilized.
Yeah.
By member states, like I was talking about the discretion, they have too much discretion to say. So we, for example, in terms of elections, we have the African Charter. We have Article 13, for example, of the African Charter, providing for elections to be held periodically and so forth. Before the African Charter, the international instruments with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 21, provides that elections must be periodic. It gives the will of the people, suffrage, universal suffrage, for example, with the International Covenant and Civil and Political Rights. These are UN instruments. And now we come to Africa with the African Charter. With the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. And like I said, Article 17 to 21, it gives us an idea of the involvement of the African Union in elections. We have also 2002 Declaration on Governing Democratic Elections in Africa, and we have also guidelines on democratic elections in Africa. These, they provide a framework or a roadmap in which member states should follow in terms of democratic elections. But so what happens is that the states, for example, when it comes to the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, they need to sign and ratify. By signing the ratifications, it means that when you've signed a treaty, you have to put it into domesticate it into your own law, which our domestic law, constitution, and our electoral acts are the ones that then gives the nuances on how elections should be done. So we do have this, but we just have a culture of disregarding with leaders who have no appetite of the rule of law. With the leaders who have no appetite to adhere to the principles that we have at the regional level. With leaders who have no appetite for respecting their own constitutions. That's where the problem is. It's a problem of leadership. It's a problem of leadership that has also underlying issues. Why are these leaders disregarding constitutions? Because maybe they want to protect their families, they want to protect people around them that they've stolen so much, lack of accountability. I'm sure you've been following what's happening in Botswana. You see former BDP members, they're committing suicide. There's already, President Vuka started a process of auditing former office bearers to some extent in terms of people asked to come out to report any corruption that they knew that existed and so forth. So there's so many underlying problems we face at the domestic level that make these leaders so cruel and that they lack the appetite to respect their own people to begin with, and their constitutions. And so what can be done? I think the issue should start with the people. People must fight for their own freedoms. It's hard to fight military governments. It's hard to fight people with guns. Most of our civilians in Africa, where we have these dictators, for example, like Uganda and so forth, you see that they are unarmed civilians fighting people with power with guns. Cameroon, that's the same case. What we are seeing also in Ivory Coast, it's repeating itself. So what could be done is that over time, so my predictions from electoral scholarship is that most of the voters, and statistics is showing across all boards, the voters are becoming the millennials, the Gen Zs. they're becoming the young people. They are becoming also the bulk of the population. So over time, and even what we've seen in Kenya and Togo, we see that regimes are facing intense pressure from the young people, from the youths. So this is a starting point. I think, for my opinion, I think this is where most governments that are dictators will fall. Because even if you are to hold elections and you have so many youths are prone to, we've seen it in Mozambique, they're prone to change. Over time, the grip of power will fall apart. Even if they may try to suppress youth voter registration and so forth, but over time, it will not. The center will not hold. So that's where the hope is. And funny enough is that most opposition guys, including here in South Africa and beyond, they don't really focus on this off-election season where it's not campaign, it's not to make sure that they register as much young people as they can.
Yes.
Because these are going to be their voters.
Yeah.
So this is where the solution is. Make sure you register them. Make sure they get IDs. But also these regimes, they know that we will play around making sure that these young people don't get IDs so that they don't vote. So that's where
the problem is. Yes.
The issue is. Lawyers should do strategic litigation whereby they ensure that they bring cases to their courts that allows people to get IDs, that allows people to get enough documentation, that allows people to register to vote in the off-season.
Yes.
When it comes to the election season, you'll be able to overpower systems that are wicked.
Yes.
So that's my simple solution to this, and looking at it from statistics point of view and looking at the trends.
No, thank you so much, Tendai, for your time. We are completely out of time. This is where we are going to leave it for the cycle this evening. The cycle will be back next week, Monday, from 6 until 7. Until then, it's a good evening, and until we meet again next week, God bless you.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views.
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
Sports.
What's he saying? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
And music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.